Hello, everybody. Hi, I'm Skip Elsheimer. Welcome to the AV Geeks Lunchtime streaming show, where we watch old 16mm films and talk about them. And that one was Lulu. That was by the Department of Interior, talking about the magical fiber that is asbestos. It can do so many things. It's heat resistant. It's fire resistant. It's so great. And you can just mine it from the ground and process the stone and bring it out and oof. Of course we know now. This is one of those things where we're like, oh yeah, that was not good. But that's the benefit of why we watch these films, and the hindsight that we have when we watch these films is that we can see. This next film is Jerusalem, the Holy City. I think it's Encyclopedia Britannica. I could be wrong, but enjoy.
Jerusalem, city with nearly 40 centuries of history. Founded in the Stone Age, fortress beside a trade route of the ancient world. Garrison city of the pharaohs of Egypt, captured by David the Israelite, destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar, rebuilt by Nehemiah, conquered by Alexander the Great, desecrated by Pompey, made a new city by Herod, governed by Pontius Pilate. Jerusalem, holy city of three religions. To enter the ancient city is to enter a historic meeting ground of the peoples of the East and the West. It is to walk among shrines men have held sacred through the ages. Near this garden is said to have lived one Caiaphas, the high priest. And in the palace of Caiaphas, Christ was imprisoned to await his trial. Of the events that came to pass within these gates it was written, and they that had laid hold on Jesus led him away to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were assembled. But Peter followed him afar off unto the high priest's palace, and went in and sat down with the servants to see the end. The Garden of Gethsemane, and rising beyond, the Mount of Olives. It was unto the Mount of Olives that Jesus and the disciples went following the Last Supper. And in the writings of Matthew, then cometh Jesus with them into a place called Gethsemane, and saith unto the disciples, Sit ye here, while I go and pray yonder. This was the night before the crucifixion. Such is the heritage shared by all the Christian faiths. Varied as may be the churches and monasteries established in Jerusalem, near the historic site sacred to tradition. Here, as the members of holy orders walk the grounds of their monasteries, it is with the belief that in these same precincts, Christ and the disciples walked and talked together. In the Jerusalem of the time of David, of Solomon, of Greek conquerors, of Roman governors, in the Jerusalem of the time of Christ, women carried pitchers to the well for water. And in the Jerusalem of today, the women of the ancient city continue the age-old practice. The scene may have been much like this when, in the time of Abraham, Rebekah came forth with her pitcher on her shoulder and went down unto the well and drew water. Threading its way laboriously toward the place called Golgotha is the Via Dolorosa, the street of sorrow, which many believe Christ trod on his way to the crucifixion. As it is the scene of the events from which Christianity took its origin, Jerusalem is the scene, too, of rituals and ceremonies cherished by a multitude of Christian faiths. Among the rituals common to Greek Orthodox, Roman Catholic, Coptic, Armenian, and other churches are the daily pilgrimages to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. On this spot where Christ is thought to have been entombed, Constantine, Emperor of Rome, built this church in 326 AD. 9 centuries later, when the Crusaders held Jerusalem, the church was rebuilt and enlarged by men who had marched from the west. The bells of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Yet well within the reach of their sound rises the Dome of the Rock, a shrine sacred to the followers of Muhammad, the prophet of Allah. So is one reminded of the variety of faiths that hold Jerusalem sacred, even as he walks among the towers and walls of this ancient Christian church. The walls, centuries old, are threatened with decay, but a tradition and heritage live on amid the storied reminders of a body of belief. The pillar of holy fire, from which flames are said to have issued during an Easter service. Within these doors a stone, held in veneration and awe, as the one on which Christ was laid after his death upon the cross. How long a history has this burial ground sacred to the Jews? This at least we know, that in the days of the years of Solomon, centuries before the Christian era, Jerusalem was the center of a great Hebrew kingdom. For the Jews, sacred ties stretched back to Solomon and beyond. Solomon the wise, he it was who brought to Jerusalem a glory, wealth, and luxury befitting a capital city. Today there are only memories and a wailing wall, where there was once a lavish royal dwelling and the imposing Temple of Solomon. Gone is the splendor of the great Hebrew kings. But the religion of Solomon, of David, of Moses, of Abraham, the worship of Jehovah and the honoring of his commandments, this endures in a living faith. Kingdoms have passed, but the law and the prophets live on in a city that is holy to the Jew. And the Mohammedan, to him too Jerusalem is a holy city. He too has known an earlier age of splendor when Muslims ruled Jerusalem and erected their sacred shrines. From early in the 7th century until recent years, Mohammedans controlled the city with only brief interruptions during the time of the Crusades. Built upon the very same ground where the Temple of Solomon stood, the Dome of the Rock stands as a shrine of the Muslim world. And when the Muslim built this towering structure, he not only raised a shrine to the greater glory of Allah, but gave to the world a work of architectural beauty. Around the walls below the tapering dome runs an Arabic inscription, This dome was built in the year 691 by Abdul Malik, commander of the faithful and servant of God. May God accept this gift of him and bless him. Amen. Three faiths differing in origin, in history, and in creed, but each for its own reasons holding sacred the historic plot of ground that is Jerusalem, the holy city.
All right. There was a little mention of Muslims in that. Yeah, it's a beautifully shot, and I think the deal was it was shot by somebody and then it was distributed by Encyclopedia Britannica. So very pretty. Even though it's like summer, let's have fewer colds. This is when I traditionally, as a kid, would get pneumonia. So let's have fewer colds.
You feel so good when you come in after fight. Yes, these boys and girls are healthy and Alice wants them to stay that way. But right now, she's noticing how many empty places there are. Do you know why? Because of colds. Yes, some of the boys and girls are missing school. They have to stay home with colds. Billy doesn't have a cold, though, and he doesn't want one. Let's pretend we can see right inside Billy's head. We'll see a drawing of a healthy nose and a healthy mouth, this part of your head, and a healthy throat. Let's take a closer look. The mucous membrane is the thin, tender lining all over the inside of the nose and mouth and throat. The fluid called mucus flows from the mucous membrane. When you are well, just enough mucus flows to help keep your nose and throat clean. That's the way Billy's nose and throat are, because he is well. Billy's friend, Dick, is absent today. Dick isn't having much fun, because he's at home in bed. He doesn't feel very well. He has a headache, and he didn't feel like eating breakfast. His nose is running so much. He has to keep blowing it. When Dick blows, he blows the right way, very gently, and he holds the tissue loosely. He never squeezes his nose. Well, Dick's mother knows how to take care of him. Mother isn't certain it's only a cold, since this is the first day Dick has felt this way. Some other diseases, such as measles and scarlet fever, start out pretty much like colds. So Mother will watch Dick's temperature, and if he has a fever for more than a day or two, she'll call the doctor. She keeps Dick warmly covered in bed, but not too warm. Dick puts his used paper handkerchiefs in a bag, so his mother can burn them, because they may have cold germs on them. What about medicine for Dick to take? Well, he has none, and he won't use any unless his doctor tells him to. Dick will get well best if he stays here in bed resting. That's the important thing to do for a cold. Uh-oh, this isn't much fun. That running nose again. What's going on inside Dick's nose and throat? Well, somehow, cold germs or virus, too small to see, got a start in here and made his throat red and sore. The inside of his nose felt dry and itchy. Have you ever felt like that? Well, when you have a cold, the mucous membrane swells up to help fight the cold germs. And the mucus flows much more than usual. Acting like a wall, the mucus and swelling nearly block Dick's nose. So, of course, he can't breathe very well. And when he sneezes, imagine what would happen at school. Those tiny drops of mucus could carry cold germs around the room. So Dick's seat is empty because he stayed home, just as we all should do if we have a cold, so we can keep the air in our classrooms clean. And that's why Miss Ellis watches the boys and girls so carefully. Oh, look here. Mary's sniffling. Well, at least when she sneezes, she covers her nose. But she might be starting a cold. So Mary must go see the school nurse and perhaps go home. If she does have a cold, she should not be here spraying cold germs into the air. She'll take care of her cold right away. Miss Ellis and her class know it isn't any fun to have colds. So they will talk about some things to do to help prevent colds. First, stay away from colds. Just what does that mean? Well, we stay home when we have a cold. We try to keep colds out of the air. But there are other things to do to stay away from colds. You've seen boys wrestling like this. But if you wrestle with a boy who has a cold, you could get cold germs from him very easily. Maybe you used to trade bites, but there could easily be cold germs on food someone else has been eating. When someone with a cold handles his books or his pencils, cold germs could easily get on them. Then you might pick up some of the germs from those books. Those are some of the things we all can do to stay away from colds. Next, avoid chilling. What happens when you are chilled? Well, suppose you go outside with clothes that aren't warm enough. What happens inside your nose and throat? When you are chilled, not as much mucus flows. Spots of the mucous membrane are left dry. Then cold germs can more easily get a start. And that's what sometimes happens when you are chilled. But did you know that you can be chilled by getting too hot? Oh, Jack doesn't want to get too hot. When you're very warm, your body is wet with perspiration. Then it's very easy to cool off too fast, and so be chilled. Billy thinks of some other things you should do to avoid chilling. When you come home from school every day, check over your clothes to be sure they are dry. Cap and jacket all right on the inside, but Billy's mittens, they're soaked. Now, wet clothing can chill you very easily. So Billy will put on a dry pair of mittens before going out again. Now, outside for some fun. It's a good idea to play outside, but be sure to dress warmly and keep your feet dry so you won't be chilled. And later, the fun turns into a snow battle. Uh-oh, Billy got it in the neck. Well, it's getting close to supper time, and he'll go into the house now to dry out before he gets chilled. As soon as he comes inside, Billy takes off all his wet clothes. At home and at school, Billy takes care to avoid chilling. Now, what else should we do? Billy would like to explain the third poster. He made it to show some good health habits. One is exercise. He gets good outdoor exercise to help keep his body strong. Another good health habit is eating the right foods. Meat and potatoes and vegetables are important for health. And they taste good, too. And look over here. Tomato juice, milk, fresh salads with lettuce, fruit. Eating the right kinds of food is a good health habit. And, of course, Billy always washes his hands with soap and water before he eats. Billy has another good health habit. He gets lots of sleep and rest. Exercise, good food, sleep. Those are good health habits. And now let's remember some of the things we've learned about having fewer colds. When you have a cold, take care of it. Rest in bed. Keep warm, but not too warm, and stay away from other people. And these are some of the things to do to help prevent colds. Stay away from colds. Avoid chilling. Warm clothes for outdoors, but take off your wraps indoors. And practice good health habits. Exercise, good food, and sleep. Isn't it?
Yeah. The cross section of the kid's head is something else. I love when they do that. They show basically like eviscerate little kids' bodies to show kids like, oh, this is what you look like inside your body, but it's got this darker interpretation of we're going to dissect this child to show you how children work. This next film is about journalism. Maybe this is a career that you're looking for in journalism. Yeah, let's see how much of this is still applicable today. Enjoy.
The alphabet has only 26 letters. With these 26 magic symbols, however, millions of words are written every day. Millions of words to report the news of all the world in newspapers. Words to tell the news of local happenings in thousands of suburban, small town, and country papers. Millions of other words in magazines of various types. In farm periodicals. In business publications. In trade and technical journals. And in general and popular magazines. Giant presses print all these words, and someone buys them either on newsstands, through the mail, or from newsboys. First, however, words must be written, and there are many writing jobs on newspapers. If you visit the newsroom of a daily paper, you will find it very similar to any busy office, although arranged somewhat differently. The newsroom is the heart of a newspaper. The managing editor, who on most papers coordinates all activities of news gathering, sends certain reporters out on important assignments. This reporter is in a hurry, and for a very good reason. He's going to cover a fire. Covering a fire is usually an exciting event, but it doesn't come nearly as often as you might think. Amid the turmoil and confusion, the reporter must be able to think clearly and quickly, and he must get his facts accurately. Assignments of this type may keep the reporter out in bad weather for many hours of hard, tiresome work. But there's a real thrill in seeing your own byline over a story when it's in print. And there's always the feeling that you'll try to make the next story just a little better. A newspaper of any size divides its local territory into districts. Reporters are given certain beats in these districts, such as the City Hall, which they cover day after day. The hospital beat is a valuable news source, and one on which events sometimes happen with startling speed. Other reporters cover the airports, bus and railroad stations, which provide a good opportunity to interview celebrities, arriving or departing. Reporters on beats are known as outside men, since they work away from the office most of the time, gathering news. Every reporter must secure from the people along his beat a steady supply of the everyday happenings which fill most of the local news columns of a newspaper. The police station is frequently assigned to beginners. The cub reporter takes information and leads on news of crime, accidents, and death from the daily police record, or blotter. Although he gathers the news, the outside man often does not write the story himself, odd as this may seem. Much of the time he stays on his beat and phones in his information. This is especially true on the larger papers, and on nearly all daily papers when the deadline is near. The information is taken at the other end by a rewrite man, who is usually a more experienced writer and is paid more for his work. After the story is written, and before it is set up in type, copy readers edit it for errors, improve it here and there if they can, and write the headlines. Then the story is set in type by the operator of a linotype, a typesetting machine which casts the words in solid lines of lead type. The placing of the type after it has been set is often supervised by the makeup editor. He has already planned the general arrangement of the paper on a layout sheet and has selected a spot for the story among all the other stories, pictures, and advertising material. Practically all daily newspapers have special departments in which certain sections of the paper are written and edited. One of these departments handles the telegraph news, which it receives from the great press associations. With reporters and writers scattered all over the world, the press associations gather important news and relay it to hundreds of newspapers over special telegraph wire services. This teletype at the local newspaper is bringing in news reports from distant parts of the nation and world. The sports section is handled in another special department. The sports reporter must be a specialist in his knowledge of sports. He gets his story right at the sporting event and often sends it in to his paper play by play. The financial section is reported by experts in the field of business. Financial reporters and editors must be able to analyze and explain business conditions as well as to report them, and they must be extremely accurate, for even a slight error has been known to influence the financial market. The society section, for the most part, is handled by newswomen. Important social events are usually covered by society reporters in person. However, much of the news for the society section comes in over the telephone. Women find it difficult to compete with men in general reporting jobs, so girls who want to be successful in journalism should prepare for work in the special women's departments. Home decoration, child care, gardening, and household hints are found in the homemaking section, a department handled by women. Also included are cookery, meal planning suggestions, menus, recipes, and attractive ways of arranging the table. Work in fashions, beauty care, and merchandise reporting affords further opportunities, almost exclusively for women. Music and dramatic critics must be authorities in their fields. They report from first-hand observation, and to hold reader confidence, they must be truthful in the information they give the public, and they must be fair to artists and performers. The editorial writer must be able to write on many subjects, but instead of merely reporting news, he analyzes it and explains its meaning, often expressing his personal opinions. He must reason accurately and fairly, and write in an interesting manner. To understand and interpret problems of the day, he must read and study continually, in addition to having a great amount of knowledge and experience. Another specialist is the political writer. He must interview political candidates and workers. He must also report a great many speeches and be able to interpret for the people who read his paper acts of government and the ideas of political leaders. The work of feature writers is found in the Sunday editions and in magazines, and these writers have names usually well known to readers. Some feature writers started their careers by writing about their hobbies. A number of magazines will buy articles on how to do things and how to make things, especially if the writer can supply good illustrations. The columnist is another writing specialist. It's nice work, but it takes years of experience and a genuine talent for writing. Some columnists and writers of many other kinds of material are able to place their work with syndicates. The syndicate drafts copies and sends them out to be printed in hundreds of newspapers. Or at the local newspaper, a matrix is received from the syndicate. The matrix is made of material like heavy paper into which has been stamped words and pictures. It is placed in a casting box into which molten type metal is poured. The matrix serves as a mold and leaves its impression on the metal. When cool, the solid type metal, which now is similar to type, is removed from the casting box and the matrix may be discarded. The type is now ready to be used to print the original syndicate material on the newspaper's own press. The country editor, unlike the city editor, must spread his attention over all phases of the business. He must go out after news himself, and from local merchants solicit the advertising that provides part of the revenue from his paper. He must then write the advertising as well as the news and plan the layout of each issue. And that's not all. He is also a printer, knowing every branch of the business. He's typesetter, pressman, and press feeder all in one. In fact, he has to know and be able to do a great many things which can be learned only through actual experience. And there's no better place to get this experience than on a small-town newspaper. Being able to set type by hand is almost a necessity, for in addition to his newspaper work, job printing forms an important part of the business of the country publisher. All this knowledge and experience seems a great deal to ask of one man, but he leads a happy life and takes pride in the fact that he is in business for himself. The publisher of a city paper has the responsibility of running a large organization. His is a good position and one you might do well to aim for, but there aren't many of them, as it is one of the top positions in journalism. You will probably start outside in just any kind of weather reporting news if you choose journalism as your life work. News reporting is a young man's job, for the reporter must have stamina and endurance to withstand the strain of long and strenuous hours of work. He must have the courage and perseverance to get the story in spite of obstacles. The qualifications of a newspaper worker are not easy ones to fill. Check your qualifications. Find out what courses you should take in school. If you don't like to write, you won't be happy in journalism. If you do like it, practice writing as much as you can. Your school newspaper and your English and social science classes are good places to start. Make them your first assignments toward success.
Yeah, so a lot has changed, man. A lot of the physical aspects of it have been gone away with. But also some of the proofreading and the editing has gone away with. So the idea that you had to go through these multiple steps to get something distributed to hundreds, thousands of eyeballs meant that there were important things that had to happen. Lots of people looking at the information. Whereas nowadays, it goes straight from someone's phone into the media universe, and that's with film or video, and with words and audio. So we're dealing with that on a daily basis. Thank you, Kevin, for donating to the cause. He went to hit the super thanks button, and that's a way to support us so that we can buy some coffee. I had a doctor's appointment and of course got some coffee and made a poor food choice. Anyways, so behind me I have a film scanner and we have a film set up, and I'm hoping that this will not get taken down. This is made by Weston Woods, which got acquired by Simon & Schuster got acquired by a children's publishing company. And this is talking about an animator who I love, Gene Deitch, or Deitch, and talks about his process. And I think it talks about him making Where the Wild Things Are, which is a really amazing thing that he did. He was animating, besides doing Tom and Jerry, besides doing a bunch of Terry Toons cartoons in the 60s and 70s, he also, I guess he moved to the Czechoslovakia or Hungary, it'll say. and set up an animation studio there and did a lot of really amazing stuff. His son is Kim Deitch, who was an amazing underground comics artist. So here we go. Let's give this a shot. This is... where is it? I might have to get some more coffee. Holy cow. This is Gene Deitch. And let me actually get the title. The picture book animated. The picture book animated. Enjoy.
Hello, funny Deitch.
The big days of my life in Prague are those on which Mrs. Prelova, the male person on our block, brings me another picture book from Weston Woods in Connecticut. Living in Prague, an ancient town so full of its own stories, I'm surrounded with an ideal ambience for my kind of work. I'm Gene Deitch, and I animate picture books. Prague is itself a picture book town with an architectural and cultural continuity 1,000 pages long. In the 14th century, Bohemian King Charles IV built this stone bridge, which quite logically continues right on to Bridge Street. It is there that I and my Czech wife and colleague Zdenka live and where I mainly do my work. In our courtyard stands a Gothic tower where an alchemist, one of many in the Prague of Rudolf II, labored at changing lead into gold. And now I'm working in here trying to change books into film. Of course, I have it easier. Gold is already here. I just have to shine it onto a movie screen. Tucked into each book when it arrives is always a note from Morton Schindel, producer at Weston Woods, to guide me in my first step, to find the core of meaning a motion picture might project. In each book it's different, and my film adaptation must grow from the unique character and content of the individual books. Every element of our film, the kind of scene continuity, animation of characters, music and sound mix, the total atmosphere, must be structured so that they do seem to shine onto the movie screen directly from the book pages themselves. There is always something that clues me as to what the book is really about. Ed and Barbara Emberley's Drummer Hoff is a fine example of what I mean. Hidden among the bright colors of this outwardly light-hearted book are some interesting hints of its real depth. As the grandly uniformed soldiers strut along, intent on constructing their mighty cannon, they ignore the flowers underfoot, the birds and insects that seem to watch them. In our film, I was able to show the soldiers actually stepping on the flowers and shooing away the birds. actions which support what I felt to be the meaning of the last page of the book, the ultimate triumph of nature over the posturings of humans and their sometimes destructive machines. Yet the fun is still there. We've tried only to project the ideas in the book, so that when the child returns to it after seeing the film, he will love it more and see it more. As our aim is always to project the book, we try always for the most valid way to adapt its graphic style to motion. The woodcut illustrations of Drummer Hoff suggested these paper puppets, which could be animated in the stiff, formal way you would expect these figures to move. With Patrick, we had a vividly contrasting style to work with. Quentin Blake's drawings are loose and free as a bird. The book is so visually lively, we decided to let the film version do its storytelling with movement and sound alone. That meant the movement had to be right. I remember how Quentin and Mort and Stenka and I all met in a London hotel room trying to imagine how Patrick would walk. How a character walks can be the key to his whole personality. Well, there we were, all galumping around that hotel room, trying to find a walk that would express Patrick's dreamy inner life. Here are the series of drawings we finally worked out to produce this one walk. And here's how it looked when these same drawings were photographed by our animation camera. To capture the sketchy chalk and aquarelle effects of the Patrick book, we had to use techniques untried in traditional animation. We found a special kind of oil crayon which would work on our sheets of celluloid. And Quentin Blake sent us the actual box of crayons that he had used for his book illustrations, and we used what was left of these to make our color backgrounds. You can't get any more authentic than that. The musical concept for Patrick seemed simple enough. A solo fiddle. That's what Patrick plays. As Patrick is clearly Irish, an Irish tune also seemed obvious. But too obvious, we thought, for a story so universal in concept. One evening, I was working on the layouts while Zdenka was doing her turn in the kitchen. A Dvorak concerto on the turntable was backgrounding our tasks, but I was at the moment more focused on my drawings. When the first side ended, I just automatically flipped the disc over and went back to work. Suddenly, Zdenka called out,
Jean! Patrick!
and you know it was? We just took that simple theme and fiddled with it. You know, in each of our films we have a great time musically. In Rosie's Walk, for instance, I had the problem of finding a local Czechoslovak group which could play American country music. And you know it was easy? We have a terrific outfit here in Prague who call themselves the Greenhorns. They had to hold themselves way back to play the simple square dance repeats for Rosie's Walk. And another of Pat Hutchins' books gave us an even more intriguing musical score. That was Changes, Changes, where we had little wooden characters without elbows or knees. This prompted not only the jerky movement we used, but the music too. Everything in the book is made of wood, so why not use pieces of wood, tuned wood, for the music? A xylophone and a marimba were the only actual musical instruments to qualify. For our bass drum, we used a wooden crate. There were lots of wood blocks and rattles. And one glorious instrument invented for the occasion. A rank of ordinary 2x4 planks, sawn to calculated lengths, hung and struck with a wooden mallet. Surely the only musical instrument on earth that is tuned with a hammer and a saw. It gave us our bass tones, and I called it our plankoplonker. František Belfin and his all-wood orchestra created plenty of musical fun. But it was also a discipline. I wanted to reflect the discipline of the little man and woman whose carry-on spirit helps them solve each problem by the rearrangement of one set of wooden blocks. And our visual discipline was equally strict. Each drawn block had its own number and individual wood pattern. Each film has its particular discipline, but the central discipline of every animated film begins with what we call a storyboard, a visual scenario which correlates all of the elements of the movie to be. My little drawings show the scene continuity, camera framing, and transitions. And in the captions, I indicate the relationship of spoken words, sound effects, and music to the film action. But once our discipline surrendered to the unexpected, and all because of the way I communicate with the producer thousands of miles away. To flesh out my storyboards and written treatments, I always send Mort Schindel a tape cassette. The Three Robbers can be most effective, I feel, Mort, if we can get a kind of mock menace in the music. I'm thinking of a bowed bass, a tuba, and a bassoon all playing in unison, with maybe an electric guitar for accents. Now, I'm sorry that I can't carry a tune at all, but you'll have the storyboard there in front of you, and I hope you'll get an idea of what I have in my head. Boom! Boom! Boom, 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 boom. Once upon a time, there were 3 fierce robbers. Boom, 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 boom. Well, Mort wired me back to forget the bassoon and just put that cassette on the soundtrack. Somehow it worked. But I think once is enough of Deitch bassooning. Anyway, I always feel the need to send off a sound cassette. Not just for the boo-boo-boo-booing, but more often to add real bits of music and sound which happen to be lying around my tape library. Anything that I can put together to help get across my film concept. It's not just a simple matter of photographing a book page by page. Though our secret aim might be to give the impression that you're really seeing the picture book animated, or that the author has personally made the film. In fact, though, in none of our films have we ever used any of the original book illustrations. In our medium, we must recreate every illustration in terms of motion, and a film always requires a good deal of additional artwork not found in the book at all. Yet it is our task to keep ourselves as filmmakers out of sight, to attempt to get as much of the author-illustrator onto the screen as we can. So, besides my own analysis of each book, I try to get whatever feelings the authors can personally give me. I learned a great lesson from the late Crockett Johnson when I was working on 2 of his Harold Purple Crayon stories. Never overlook the art of the seemingly simple, he told me. He happened to be a master of the seemingly simple. No films we've made, though, were, in fact, more technically difficult to produce than A Picture for Harold's Room and Harold's Fairy Tale, both of which look so simple on the screen. Harold's Room, for example, is really a fascinating lesson in size relationship and perspective. To make it work on the screen, it meant that Harold must always be the exact same size in relation to the film frame. In effect, it meant that the entire film must appear to be one continuous scene. And if that weren't enough of a problem, and now how am I going to get you non-animators to believe this? We were forced to shoot the entire film backwards. You see, if we were to add on each bit of line which Harold draws, it would produce a disturbing wiggling and jittering. which would destroy the illusion that Harold is really making a drawing with his purple crayon. The delicate fantasy would be lost. So we had to prepare in advance Harold's entire drawing, moving over it relentlessly backwards from the end to the beginning. All along the way, we erased the line, matching each of Harold's positions, photographed in reverse order. Before our camera, Harold undrew his scenery. When we finished shooting, the huge drawing had been completely wiped out. Only when you saw the film projected forward did you see it reappear. One mistake and we shoot the whole thing over again. So much for the seemingly simple. In the case of Story a Story, I was especially lucky. Author-illustrator Gail Haley was kind enough to come to Prague and show me and our animators the specific nature of the body movement and gestures inherent in this African legend. How a spoon would be held, a gesture would be executed, or a dance performed came across to us vividly with her personal demonstrations. A Story also provided us with one of our most exciting musical adventures. We wanted authenticity, but the only Africans we could find in Czechoslovakia, besides diplomats, were young exchange students, and they played only hard rock on electric guitars. In the Prague Old Town, Zdenka scouted out the Naprstkovo Ethnographic Museum, which houses a fine collection of African instruments. Here, in a tiny upstairs room, she found Dr. Václav Kubica, the museum's expert on the music of Asian and African peoples. Dr. Kubica was able to compose and notate an amalgam of African instrumental styles which could support the various episodes of our film and to gather together a group of musicians who understood the tonalities involved. The stronger the story, the greater the book we start off with, the greater our responsibility. I don't know if the news will impress you or fill you with dismay, but we worked on Where the Wild Things Are on and off and in and out of 5 years before I could see it approved for release. Adapting Wild Things into a movie was probably my most hazardous undertaking for Weston Woods. The Mount Everest of children's books. We had to do it because it was there. And once started, there was no hedging. I had to find my own way to Where the Wild Things Are. An animated motion picture of this book faced enormous difficulties, technical as well as philosophical. Maurice wanted the film to go beyond the book, a tall order. But he knew there was no point in doing it at all unless we could illuminate some of the implied dimensions of the book and try to extend them. He too came to Prague, and we had some long walking talks through old corners of the town. We both wanted a magical film, and he did give me some fascinating hints. In this story, he said, everything is Max. As for the music, he later wrote, think of Deep Purple. The old song Deep Purple stirred memories for me, too. As Maurice, I'm also a child of the 30s. I began to see the root of a musical and sound device to evoke the distance between Max and his parents, who were unseen in the book. After all, why is Max making mischief of one kind and another? To attract the attention of his parents. But where are they? Probably in the next room having a party or watching TV, but not being with Max. So I came to the idea of this muffled, sweet 30s music. The applause, the canned laughter, the comedian's joke, and so on. I decided that this very music, which represents the distance between Max and his parents, would become increasingly distorted with Max's growing rage and his journey into fantasy. Along the same line, I wanted all of the sound effects to be within Max's home experience. So to create the Wild Things dance rhythm, I restricted myself to domestic sounds which might express Max's feeling of isolation and which might suggest parents being too busy for Max. A gas oven lighting, a door slam, a car starting, a baby crying. All of these sounds, repeated over and over, were used to heat up the music. Which I distorted simply by spinning the record by hand and letting it reverberate from one tape recorder to another. It took weeks to get all of these elements positioned just right onto the 4 tracks of my quadro recorder. Then it was a matter of mixing them all together for the balance and atmosphere I wanted.
So he was sent to bed without eating anything. Things are. They roared, terrible roar.
But then, how to animate these complex drawings? In the traditional processes of cartoon film animation, such characters as these would first have to be simplified to sterile line and flat color. It would have certainly been the easy way for us, too, but it wouldn't have been Sendak. A new technique developed especially for this film by one of the studio artists, Rudolf Holland, made it possible to use the book's original rendering style directly onto our animation cells. It was basically painting of a white latex base in the shape of each animating figure. When this dried, a paper-like surface resulted, onto which we could paint and draw with pencil, fine pen lines, and even watercolor. It took 1.5 years just to render the hundreds of moving character drawings and backgrounds for this film. But such extraordinary drawings could not move in an ordinary way. As the Wild Things are presumed to be a product of Max's mind, I devised a special way of photographing these drawings in series of overlapping multiple dissolves to give them the sluggish, dreamlike quality Maurice envisioned. All of this required much doing and redoing. We gave up and restarted several times. It was 5 years later that we were able to hold a party celebrating the release of Wild Things. A party all the way was doing Tommy Ungerer's The Beast of Monsieur Racine. I loved Monsieur Racine's perfect serenity in a world of chaos. And here was an elderly person doing interesting things, an important image for children. I felt I was searching out with them the secret fun of this marvelous book. When I take my storyboard, soundtrack, scene layout drawings, and production notes up to the Barendorf studio, the film is already conceptually complete, but there's still a mountain of creative and production work to be done. Zdenka and her crew are all artists and craftsmen of world caliber. The animators are our actors. They can give life to drawings through the skillful timing of carefully phased series of poses. It takes 10 years to make an animator, so don't expect me to explain that to you in a few words. Then there are the assistants who laboriously draw the in-between positions, each with its vital film frame number, and the color and rendering specialists who can paint figures and backgrounds in the style and technique of any book illustrator, the character inkers and colorists, the camera operators, film assemblers. Without these people, our little movies would not exist. At the beginning, I said it was the continuity of Prague which was one of the things which attracted me to stay and work here. An even more compelling factor was the continuity represented by these people. Many have worked here for over 30 years, including my Zdenka. She started here as a kid and has never worked anywhere else. Well, we're not kids anymore, but our happy work keeps us in continuous touch with children. That's our youth potion. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think I'll run downstairs and see if Mrs. Perlova has a new book for me.
That film, very big fan of his work, and a lot of the Weston Woods films were basically iconographic, which what that means is they would just take illustrations from the book and then they would pan or zoom in or zoom out or tilt or whatever, very basic as someone narrated. Some of the better ones are like the ones that you saw, ones that were actually animated, and you could see how much work went into this. Now, what's interesting is in the 80s, they released a bunch of these, and I think it was Scholastic. Was it Scholastic? I can't remember. But they released a bunch of Weston Wood things on video, and they actually changed the soundtrack for Where the Wild Things Are. It went from a really awesome film, an awesome soundtrack, to something that was really pedestrian and just not good, which is frustrating. And I don't know why that was, but I thankfully have a copy of that on film, the original version, and it does. It's like it kind of puts you into this otherworldly type of feeling. And so kudos to him. I think he's passed. The other thing was that he was a record collector. He loved collecting 78s. So that's one of the things he used to write. He used to draw cartoons for 78 collector magazines. So there's a whole thing about that. So look him up, Gene Deitch, or Deitch. I heard him say it, and then I immediately forgot how you pronounce it. Thank you so much, M Trader, for donating in your currency, your Czech currency. I'm happy that we got to show your hometown. And thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll be back again tomorrow. We'll watch some more films. And that's what we do. You can hit the thumbs up button, the like button. Even if you've done it in the past, please do it again. Subscribe so that I can get another plaque right there from YouTube. And you can donate at ko-fi.com/avgeeks or patreon.com/avgeeks. That will help pay for some film leader that we just had to buy. We're always, because we're constantly pulling and scanning films and cataloging them, we're constantly using supplies. And so putting leader on a film is one of the things that we do. And your donations help us pay for that. Everybody have a great rest of your day. What is it, Thursday? Man, I don't know. Anyways, talk soon.